settled it behind Jamestown, 1607. Plymouth, Massachusetts, 16... No teachers aboard. 1620. Salem, 1626, and Boston, 1630. We're 4 years older than Boston. And we were the capital of Massachusetts, not once but twice. And as the story goes, every time a new governor here would come in here from England, he would come here, take the charter back into Boston. Well, I think what happened the second time, we said, you know what? If you like it so much, don't keep bringing it back here. Keep it there. And that's how they ended up being the capital. And we became just good old Salem. He's the kind of guy who's going to be in trouble. You're not supposed to come up here. There's a big sign. We were founded by a fellow named Roger Conant, the guy on the statue, all right? He came to Plymouth in the year 1623. Found out he could not get along with the Puritans, which was absolutely no surprise, because guess what? Nobody could. He got a little upset. He moved to Hull, Massachusetts, and while he's down there, he gets approached by a minister, and he says to him, would you possibly be willing to help us go up north of here about 16 miles and see if we can salvage a fishing village up there that's in deep trouble? Long story short, he goes up there, gives it his best effort, but guess what? It was the wrong thing at the wrong place at the wrong time. It fails. They all got back on their ships, and they headed due south, landing about a mile and a quarter in that direction, where they're greeted by a bunch of friendly local Indians called the Naumkeag, Naumkeag, whose very name, translated, means Land of Three Rivers, great place to fish. So you see, Roger got quite lucky. Now, the Indians taught him how to plant corn and lima beans, mix the two together to make succotash, how to harvest clams, how to build these little huts called wickiups, which kept them nice and warm during the long winter months. And that basically explains why we have Salem today. Now, one theory I have, the reason for them being so friendly was in the 2 years prior to Roger's arrival, the Indians lost about 90% of their population through wars with other Indian tribes or through illness. It's entirely possible Roger and his followers outnumbered them. Plus, they had guns. The Indians didn't. Who knows, right? Going to take a left here. Before we do, look right behind me here, that big building. That used to be a commercial laundry building. Guess what it is today? Condominiums. See the red brick building to your left here? That used to be the courthouse and the Salem jail. Guess what it is today? Condominiums. Watch how many times that word creeps into my vocabulary in the next 20 minutes. We're heading up Charter Street, so named, like I said, we were in the capital of Mass twice. That is a tour guide standing there with that screwy hat, and I know him. We have some very interesting tour guides in this town. Over here, the old burial point, marked graves going back to the year 1637. Lots of famous and infamous people. The one we like to talk about, however, is John Haythorne, Hathorne. He was the hanging judge for the witchcraft wars. He's also, little be known to some people, he's the great-great-grandfather of Nathaniel Hawthorne. Now, Hawthorne added a W to his last name when he was a student at Bowdoin College, deliberately trying to put space between him and his infamous great-great-grandfather. Well, I make it a point to tell everybody. We apologize for the fencing, by the way. It's temporary while they're doing some massive repairs in there. This building right here is the Pikmin House, not the red one, but this one. The door back there with all the nails in it's called a back door. Those nails were decorative, by the way. If you put them in your door like that, it says you were wealthy, because they were very expensive. Of course, if you backed into them, they were a health hazard. On the right, you see those lovely people sitting here at the opening of that low granite wall. That is the Witch Trial Memorial, dedicated in 1992 by Ellie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor. There are 20 benches lining the inside, one for each of the victims of the witchcraft trials, 19 of which were hanged, 14 women, 5 guys. The 20th victim, Giles Corey, was pressed to death. Why? Because 3 times accused of being a witch, he refused to enter a plea. So one day they went to his house, dragged him straight across the street, put him in a narrow trench, put boards on his chest, and for 2 days kept putting bigger and bigger rocks on top of the board, trying to press a confession out of him, which, by the way, was perfectly legal by British law. It's called pressing. And many times the victim was naked. I'm not sure in his case. Right? But it didn't work, because he never did confess. His last 2 words before his chest collapsed and he died instantly were, more weight. More weight. But don't feel sorry for him, because he testified against his own ex-wife, and she was one of the 14 women that were hung. Not exactly a good or just a nice guy. The Lydia Pinkham Free Baby Clinic, you can't get a free baby, just free health care for your kid right there. Lydia was a very interesting lady. She thought women needed help during childbearing later on in life. She came up with a bunch of patent medicines. One was called Pink Pills for Pale Ladies, guaranteed color in your cheek. She had a liquid veggie tonic she claimed would cure just about anything, right? Huge sellers. The federal government said, what's in it? And she said, I'll tell you. In the veggie tonic, it's 16 to 18% alcohol on 32 proof, with a giant swirl of opium thrown in for flavoring. And those little pink pills just happen to be pure cocaine. Well, needless to say, she had to change her formulae. That's the bad news. The good news is she's back on the market. If you go out to Amazon, you can buy her stuff. But be careful when you get home, read the package. Now it says no longer in the original formula. Oh, darn. This is Pickering Loft, named after Lieutenant Colonel Timothy Pickering, who was a war hero in George Washington's army. It's meant to look like a fishing or sailing village. Condominiums on the 2nd floor and 3rd floor, and sometimes the 4th floor. Lovely shops and restaurants, including a spice shop over there that has an unbelievable array of spices. On the right over here, we have longboards specialized in lobster rolls, outdoor dining, al fresco outside. Nice day for it, actually. 2 beautiful seafood restaurants over here, Finn's on the right, Sea Level on the left. And right behind me, a replica of the original French ship. Now, the original French ship looks just like that, because we have the actual plans to keep the Essex. The original sailed out of here in the 1700s, went around the world 13 times, captured by the British, and that was the last we saw of it. But they took the plans to the Skerritt Boatyard, Albany, New York. They built that replica for the National Park Service. We just got it back. It's been up in Gloucester for about 2.5 years, which explains why they haven't put the rest of the mast up yet. Yeah. That building there used to be only 2 stories tall. Now it's 4, because they wanted twice as many condos. That's the name of the game, right?
Can we go up to the next slide?
You can get up right around the corner, yeah. That's the National Park. And there's even restrooms that are open there. How's that? That's a special treat here in Salem. This is Derby Street we're turning on to right now. And we're going to pause in front of Derby Wharf, which is part of the National Waterfront Park here. It's a national park since 1935 because President... Hold on. No, that's not who I thought it was. I got a little nervous. I don't want to talk about it.
Look at that view.
Let's just say part of my past. Yeah, this is a national park since 1935. You're welcome to get off if you like. We'll be back in an hour. Restaurants are to your right. House of the Seven Gables is to your left. Was it something we said? Yeah, okay. Just hungry. Well, there you go. One could explain that priority, right? Well, you see the little lighthouse at the end of the walk, that's called Derby Light, that's Derby Walk. This is Derby Street. We have a trolley named Derby. Why? Because Elias Haskett Derby was the first cash millionaire in America. We were the wealthiest seaport in America for 100 years until the war of 1812. We had 50 wharfs, we're down to 3, right? What happened is they invented the liquor ship. It was too big to get into our harbor. So all the maritime trade, almost overnight, disappeared, went to Boston, Philadelphia, and New York. And we got into the Industrial Revolution, building big buildings like that big white one over there, which at one point was the largest steam cotton mill in America until it moved to South Carolina. And we got into the tourism business, not really, but something like that. Lovely restaurants along here. You have the Witch's Brew coming up on your left. And then Mercy Tavern, which his old name was, I like better, was In a Pig's Eye. They changed it to Mercy Tavern. If you like blues, many times in 40th Saturday nights they do blues concerts there. And the food's pretty good too. They serve too many green things for me though. I'm basically a carnivore eating pasta kind of guy. Turning into the parking lot, the House of the Seven Gables. Right here, right behind me. As we get deep into the parking lot, you'll see the house is that way. It sits way down in the water. Big red chimney sticking up in the air, which you can still see until the trees fill in. It's right there, behind the flagpole. That was the John Turner Mansion, built in 1668 for a wealthy ship captain. And after he left it, many years later, one of Hawthorne's cousins lived there, which is why he knew all about it, because he'd come down to spend quality time with her up in the turret, reading books, whatever, which caused him to write the novel The House in Seven Gables, based upon the house. In 1910, what was left of it was rescued by Caroline Everton, a wealthy entrepreneur who opened up the settlement house across the street with all the proceeds from tourism. That was the first tourist attraction in Salem. Now, she had this place here used for immigrants coming to this country. They would get them health care, find them places to work and live and so forth, and teach them English. Well, that's all still happening, but no longer there, because that's condominiums now. And right across the street, the oldest candy store in America, you may have seen it as we were coming into the parking lot. Just in case you decide to go back to the house in Seven Gables, that's even a better reason to do so, because you go get candy across the street. I'm a frequent flyer there, and I can tell you, it's delicious stuff. Now, they used to build ships right here. At one point after the war ended, we built 1/3 of all the new ships here in America. Ours were different than the European variety. They were slightly smaller, but much better built, and guess what? Much faster. We could get across the water much quicker than the British ships could. One of the reasons was, we pioneered trade with the Far East. Now, we were sending boats to the Orient long before anybody else ever thought about it. Sometimes we run into an island filled with headhunters, but every once in a while, that's called overhead, right? The ship doesn't come back because the crew is down somebody's belly. Or somebody called us, there is actually a whole storyline about if you were captured, it was called Salem Stew. That's what you were there. See the lovely tank over there at the playground of the school? That's an authentic World War II tank. We had a general live there called General Grizzick, who literally brought his tank back home with him. How he did it, I got to find out someday, because that's fascinating. There's our power plant, which burns natural gas that replaced one that used to burn coal and oil. The old one used to have to power wash the houses here twice a year because to get the coal dust off. So the neighbors are much happier with that one. And that's frankly 1/3 of the tax base here in Salem, because we really don't have any manufacturing. The two largest employers in Salem are education, Salem State University, and the healthcare, which is the Salem North Shore Hospital. Heading out to a place called Winter Island, so named because it never froze in the wintertime, which is why it was good news, because the inner harbor used to freeze. And from November to March, you couldn't get a ship in there. And poor Mr. Derby, who had over 400 ships, he would send them to Canton, China, come back in November, and they couldn't offload. That was a problem. Well, they found they could brought them out here, they could unload and then truck it in by horse and wagon. So that solved the problem. Well, we're going to the island, but it's no longer an island, and we're not a duck boat, so that's the good news. This was the Smith estate here on the right, a very wealthy industrialist who built his employees their very own saltwater swimming pool. Take a look to your right. Oldest and largest saltwater swimming pool in America. He built it literally by putting a wall across the entrance to the cove right there. And that square little building out there has pipes sticking up. That's a valve housing. And the way it worked was, at high tide, you would open the valves, let the seawater come in, close the valve, trapping it, so the residents could use the water tower and the slides and enjoy themselves. It was used continuously till just before the start of the Second World War. And that's when the U.S. Coast Guard built an air base out here called Salem Air Station. And they informed the city they'd have to close the pool because it was a security risk, and they did. And in fact, it stayed closed even long after the Coast Guard left, until it was acquired by Salem State University, a very fine local college. And now you have to go there if you want to take your maritime courses. They're in the red brick building. But I'm happy to tell you, the other thing they do is the last 10 or 12 years, every year they've raised over 2 million baby soft-shell clams in that very pool. I took the tour, Professor Joe, my grandson and I, and he taught us how they start with a microscopic sized clam, the size of a speck of black pepper. And they let it grow till it gets about as big as a thumbnail, then they harvest them and put them in the clam beds up in Essex and Ipswich, famous for their fried clams. Once the boats get out of here, you'll see the hookups along the fence for RVs and camper trailers. And that site right there with all the benches beside it, that little barbecue pit, that's Site 40. For the tenders to know, that is the site of the last public hanging in Salem. Had nothing to do with the witch trials. It was a 16-year-old boy that stole a horse and burned the barn down. Double felony. They caught him, hung him right there. Used to hang the pirates here as well, but they hung them down by the water so that the ships coming in and out of the harbor would see them hanging there. And guess what? We never cut them down. We just waited till they fell out all on their own. Now on the right you see that hangar, one of the two left in the country built by the Coast Guard. The other one is down in Miami, Florida. And we hear the one in Miami is in great shape. Ours is, let's be polite, it needs help. It's in terrible shape. But they housed the aircraft here. See, they couldn't get a Coast Guard cutter in here, it was too shallow. So this was an air base. You didn't see a runway, did you? Because they took off and landed in the water. They had pontoons in the bottom. They were propeller driven, and their first mission was to look for submarines off the coast. And then later on, this became a helicopter search and rescue base as well. Quite a history with the Coast Guard. A lot of people putting their boats in the water today. About time. In about a week, these will all be back in the water. We have a very short boating season here, honestly. Right behind me here is the South River. South of here is the Forest River. North of here is the North River. Hence the name Nomkang, land of three rivers. There's your three rivers. Right across the way is the town of Marblehead. We had a wedding take place here last time we came around. Right in that little cupola there. Marblehead was the first to break off from Salem. When Salem was first founded, it was huge. Consisted of all of Marblehead, parts of Linden, Swampscott, all of Peabody, Danvers, Knoxville, Hamilton, Wenham, Beverly, and Salem. That was all Salem. And one by one they broke off. Marblehead, the drunken fishermen from Marblehead, they were the first to leave. They weren't getting along with the ministers anyway. Now that's a very wealthy town. Lots of famous people live there, like Peter Lynch from Fidelity's Magellan Fund. And there's a fellow named Van Otterloo that has the largest collection of Rembrandt paintings in America. They do well, both of them. On the right over here, you see the remains of a fort and a lighthouse. That's Fort Pickering Light, named after, again, Lieutenant Colonel Timothy Pickering. Now, originally, this was a fort called Fort William, built by the British when we were all British citizens back in 1640, to protect us from invasion from Spain or Spanish pirates, neither of which ever showed up. So it was a total waste of money. But you can see it had a moat going around this on the right over here. It's all filled in with weeds and stuff. But this little road right here used to lead to a drawbridge, which was torn down, I think, in the 1950s. It's still a good place to come walk around. There's all kinds of signage up there that tells you about the mission of the fort and all that stuff. There were basically 3 forts to protect this area from invasion. Marblehead has at least 1. We have 3. Over here, this is the other half of the boat right here. And then you see the sign, we've all arrived now at Waikiki Beach. Believe it or not, there's a beautiful white sandy beach down there. One of 3 Waikiki beaches. There's the Honolulu one, the original, this one, and also Perth, Australia. But in July, you can go down there and put your toe in the water. You know you're not in Honolulu, because the water temperature here very seldom gets above 70 here. It's in the 40s right now, I know that. That's the Assistant Harbor Master's place right there. And now, look at the half moon shapes over here. That's where the Coast Guard used to store their depth charges and torpedoes. They took the heavy metal doors off. There is exactly 10 of them, cleverly numbered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30. So if you haven't showed up, they waste a lot of time looking for 20 more that don't actually exist. April 4th. Keep looking for a very chubby groundhog right over here. Normally he'd be here very much, but there's no tenders here yet. That's what he lives off, the tenders. Used to call him Chucky until a couple years ago. He's Daddy's summer home. Can you imagine what a beautiful place? This is actually an excellent beach over there. Well, when her daddy died, what did she do? She made it into an orphanage immediately. Why? Because there were so many young boys on the streets of Salem who were orphaned or abandoned. She literally took in about 12.5. She fed them, clothed them, got them to school each and every day. It's still happening today. But today it's a non-profit organization with a board of directors. We help them with fundraising. Every year they do a paddleboard race, and a couple of times a year we bring a trolley down filled with people in their checkbooks, and we give them a little bit of cheese and crackers and a whole bunch of wine, and they write big checks, and everybody leaves happy. Originally it was for all boys. 2 years ago they made it co-ed. We changed the name from Plumber Home for Boys to be Plumber Youth Promise. Now there's about 18 or 20 young folks put there. who attended all the schools in Salem like any other kid would, involved with sports, involved with any other activity like any other kid in Salem. The only difference is they lived there, because the home situation that we plucked them from was anything but attractive. Now we're going to take a right on Columbus Avenue, which was an area developed by a bunch of religious folks from up the Low Lawrence area. They came down here to have a revival meeting, so originally these were all tent lots. When the religious folks left and people wanted to build houses, they found out they had to buy at least 2 or 3 tent lots to build one house. Now, some of these were originally summer rentals, but now it's year-round, fully insulated. I just love this street. I think this is just the right place to be in Salem. My favorite, that big house right there, because the guy tore down a perfectly fine house to build that one, because the original house just wasn't what he wanted, right? Well, he could afford to do that because he owned 6 of the 12 Dunkin' Donuts here in Salem. And here we are, Juniper Cove. The water, I believe, is still coming in. Look at this, yeah. I'm sorry? 3:47, geez. All right, so we're off by a few minutes. 19 minutes from now, it'll be high tide. And it'll come up just to the top of this little landing to my left here. And it takes 6 hours and 29 minutes for the tide to fully come in. And guess what? 6 hours and 28 minutes later, in fact, when we come back here in 7 hours, there won't be any water here. None. Zero. All the way out to the breakwater on the far left. Twice a day high tide, twice a day low tide. Now, normally 9 to 12 feet deep at its best, all right? But during the winter time, we have these storms called nor'easters, right? You see the opening back here, they put these things like white trash bags there to protect the street. Well, it didn't work last year because twice it came up to the top of the porches across the street on this side. Which, if you live here, is not the best news, because that means you probably lost your furnace and your hot water heater, which they did. One guy further down lost the house, basically. You like the color of that house? I think it's great. Where do you live? I live in the purple house. Everybody knows right away which one is yours. I think it's attractive. What happened to the guy with the sign for the Kentucky Derby? Did he take it down? It's on his porch. Oh, I didn't see it. Okay. You never know what you're going to see down here. This is an interesting part of Salem. It really is. This is called the Willows, named after the fact that the British gave us 200 willow trees one time. And the reason they did is they found out we had a chronic care tuberculosis hospital. And the Brits found out if they put their patients under the willow trees, it seemed to help them breathe easier. So we planted the trees all over the place. Of course, the nor'easter have eliminated a number of them. That used to be an amusement park on a steam train. There used to be hotels and restaurants here. It's like they've done the fertilizing because they have the little yellow flags. And it looks like the clam shack's about to open. 3 years ago, that was the men's room. Yeah. There's the North River. Far side is the town of Beverly, city of Beverly, I'm sorry. And you see the grassy area straight across that has like a little beach at the base of it? That's Independence Park, the northernmost encampment of George Washington's army during the Revolutionary War. Now, he was camped there when we built a ship in Marblehead. We called it the Hannibal. And we named it after the wife of the captain. We brought it all the way over there to put the sails and rigging on. And while it's in dock, none other than George Washington walked down and put a pennant on it to make it the first member of the Continental Navy. Well, Beverly was so darn proud they couldn't wait. 30 seconds later, they put a sign up at the beginning of the drawbridge declaring themselves to be the birthplace of the American Navy. Well, Marblehead said, wait a minute, if we hadn't built a ship, where would you put the flag? We put our own flag, our own sign up. Now we're going to keep going because it gets very windy here. Well, this is Dead Horse Beach. It got the name back on June 25th, 1914. We had the start of a 2-day fire where 1/3 of the city was burned to the ground. The fire started at a location called Blubber Hollow, where they were processing whale oil. The factory catches fire. It's a hot, windy day. They can't get it out. It catches the next one, catches the next one. 2.5 days later, we do get it out. It was burned all the way down to the waterfront with the help of 23 or 4 surrounding cities and towns. The good news is the fire is out. The bad news, there's about 24 dead horses on the streets of Salem in June 1914. Not a very pretty sight. So what to do? Well, they decided to bring all the dead horses down here to that beach, waited for low tide, dug an enormous trench, put all the dead horses in, covered it up, shook hands and said, job well done. Not really. Because 2 days later, those horses began to float, they all came back on shore, and they smelled horrible. Well, plan B, they pile up the horses, they burn them with kerosene, took the remaining bones, put them back in the trench, covered it up, and at that point they renamed the beach from Downtown Beach to Dead Horse Beach, and that's what it's called today. Its real name. Lovely houses, most of them built by Korean War veterans right after the Korean War. Houses on that side about 350 to 400,000 here, whatever. See the condos right here, that's where the chronic care hospital used to be, but when they tore it down when they cured the disease, they didn't need it. The contractor buys this property, starts digging the foundations, and almost immediately he's on the phone, he's screaming at the mayor saying, "What did you sell me? Every time I stick a steam shovel in the ground, I dig up human remains, dead bodies." And the mayor said, "Oh my God, you must have found a hidden cemetery." And in fact, that's exactly what happened. When it wasn't a chronic care hospital and somebody passed away, unless a family member claimed the body, they would find some random place and bury him. And they forgot to keep track of where that was. So now when the good guy buys the property, he's trying to dig foundations, he's digging up dead bodies everywhere he looks. The good news is they dealt with it, they found final resting places for everybody they could find. But that doesn't mean they didn't miss a couple, right? Those yellow things are lobster traps. In case you never saw a lobster trap, now you can say you have. Right. You never know what you're going to hear on a trolley tour. You really don't. Especially with me. Especially, I have no idea. You know James Joyce, Stream of Consciousness? You're in a Stream of Consciousness tour. Whatever crosses, right? This is a Russian Orthodox church right behind me. It's the second oldest one in America. The oldest one is in Sitka, Alaska. You know, which used to be part of Russia. You know, the old, I can say Russia from here. Anyway, now they still services in Russia. There's got about 100 Russian families live here. Twice a month they do Russian. And that's Ziggy's, the best donut shop in Salem. All the police go there. They're looking for a cop tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. They're all lined up. They don't go to Dunkin's, they go here. Now, Betty and I would like to show you what we think is the closest neighbors in Salem. Take a look to your right, and after the little store, there'll be a White House. You go in that one. But then look at the green house and the yellow one immediately next to it. I mean immediately, I do mean immediately. Check this out. Here's the green one. And here comes the yellow one. That's about 14 inches. Windows right across from each other. It's kind of cool, right? Look on the left, dark brown building, white plaque, 1854, the old Fry building. But look at this, 2 buildings later. Greenhouse, 1668. This is one of the older neighborhoods in Salem. A lot of the really old houses have been torn down and replaced with newer ones, but not that one. Nor the one that's coming up on the left. See the 2 light green ones here, the smallest one, right after the smallest one. Keep looking. See that rather ominous looking dark brown building right here? That's the bed and breakfast. It's called Daniel's house. It's roughly the same age as the house of the 7 Gables, 1660s. And we tell anybody who's coming back for Halloween, great place to stay. Low ceilings, creaky floorboards, questionable plumbing. Perfect for Halloween, right? We're going to take a right here eventually.
Yeah.
As soon as these guys come out of the side street, figure out what they're doing. Oh dear. Don't wake them, whatever you do. I know. Of course, there's somebody crossing the street. That'll be a little girl on the bike, wearing a helmet, looks like a pig. That's ridiculous. It's not a pig, what is that? I have no idea what that is. Some questionable pink animal, all right. If you saw the movie Hocus Pocus, please take a look to your left on the next intersection. You see the great big red schoolhouse that was identified as the Jacob Bailey High School at the beginning of the movie. Right there. That was never a high school, it was always a grammar school. But even then, as it is today, it's housing for the elderly. They had to take down their fancy drapes when they filmed the movies so that you wouldn't see them. Salem Common on your left, I contend it's the oldest common in America, even though Boston claims theirs is. But I remind you, we're 4 years older than they are, so I don't know what methodology they're using. A lot of people on the common today, a lot of dogs. Nothing to do there. And you see the flagpole out there with a plaque in front of it? That was given to us by President Barack Obama when he declared us to be the birthplace of the American National Guard, because we had the first military muster right there in that common in the early 1600s. Now, up until this year, they used to have a gathering every April, hundreds of National Guard troops, but this year, because of the pandemic, they scaled it way back. I think there was like 10 people from the National Guard and the Lady Mayor, but they brought the 7 cannons For the 21 Cannon Saloon on a Saturday morning at 9:15, it sets off every car alarm for 6 blocks. It's always an annual event. See the nice red brick building over there? That was the Joseph Story House, the youngest Supreme Court Justice in history at the age of 32. Co-founder of the Harvard Law School. His daddy was the judge at the Armistead trial. Really colorful dude. Beautiful houses. Originally owned by ship captains or captains of industry, take your pick. John Bertrand mansion right here, originally home for aged men, but we didn't have enough of those. Now it's co-ed. Assisted living for men and women. Right behind me, the Witch Museum, one of the top attractions in Salem. Looks like a church because that's what it was. It was a Universalist Unitarian church until it burned down, except for the impressive front facade here. Became a car museum. Guess what? That burned down too. And there's our famous statue, which is not a witch. That's our founder, Roger Conan. The high hat and flowing robes were signs of authority. Poor Roger. I feel bad for him, actually. That statue's been on that rock since 1915. Then they opened the Witch Museum 32 years ago, put up that huge sign on the building. Now everybody comes here from out of town, doesn't know any better, assumes it's a witch. It's not a witch. Fine Christian gentleman, lived to be 87 years old, which was truly exceptional back in those days. 60 was pushing it. There's our famous hotel, Hawthorne, flying flags every day. Oh, they got both flags up? Yeah, they do. It's California flag on the left, I think. And over here, the tricolors of France, perhaps? Yes, indeed. They used to rotate them alphabetically, a state and a country flag. Except now, they tell me, if you're staying there and you want your flag flown, you just tell them. You put your state or your country flag up for you. And I know it's true, because 19 years ago, I was enjoying my son's wedding reception in the Hotel Hawthorne, and I was dressed in my tuxedo, and I went right up to that front desk in the middle of the wedding reception, and I said, would you please put up the Swedish flag? And they looked at me and said, well, why would we do that? I said, because I'm paying for the wedding. And they said, give us 5 minutes. And my God, they put the flag up. So I consider that the best place in Salem to have your wedding reception. It's just a great bunch of people. Now we're heading back to the visitor center. If you haven't been by here twice, you haven't seen the whole tour, because there's another 20 minutes, believe it or not. And we'll be leaving, as Shakespeare would say, forthwith. Forthwith, or maybe fifthwith, actually. Hello, sitting in the sun, aren't we?